This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so as I mentioned when I spoke in Shul Friday night, that I was truly amazed about the national impact of my classes. That last Thursday we started with Roe v. Wade, and on Friday the Supreme Court got wind of that already, and they issued their ruling. We will discuss that also, and we will discuss. Well, we've been discussing a Torah view on that ruling, and the ruling was actually a non-ruling. In other words, officially what they said is this is not a federal law to be decided, rather this is a state law to be decided. But along with that came the rescinding of certain rights, quote unquote, that people felt that had been granted to them, and now that was being certainly altered. Okay, and we'll touch upon, it was an interesting article about a change in, Your Honor, it might be easier this way actually. The change in Israel. There was a changing of some laws in Israel regarding abortion that came on the heels of the Supreme Court ruling. So last week we began that, well, we discussed a number of times that Judaism doesn't view these medical decisions as a right. You know, in American law, the question is who has the right to decide? Whose decision is it? And then basically they can make whatever decision they want to make. Whereas it's not so much who, but it is more a decision of what, meaning what is the right decision to make. And we discussed the different sources that we have. There is a pasuk of shofech dam ha'adam ba'adam. If a person spills the blood of a person, ba'adam, in a person. Now, how does one spill the blood of a person? Which person is in a person? So according to Rabbi Yisroel, at least the Rabbanim disagree. According to Rabbi Yisroel, that is a reference to an abortion, to a fetus. That is a person who is in a person whose blood can be spilled. Of course, there's lo tirtzah, 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder. And the question is this considered to be murder or not? And even if it's not considered to be murder, certainly there is much gravitas that is in order here, because we have potential life that is being snuffed out. We also mentioned the Torah tells us the story of two guys fighting, and one tried to kill the other and instead hit a pregnant woman. And there we discussed that if she died, then it's a capital case. If she did not die, but she miscarried as a result of that wound that she sustained, so then it's not a capital case. It's not considered to be murder. Rather, it becomes a monetary case of whenever one assaults someone else and causes damages. Actually, we have 5 different categories of payments that need to be assessed, and the person needs to pay that. But when there is a capital case, when there is a murder, so then we do not look at any damages that went along with that. Right? If a person shoots someone else, right, it's a capital case. We don't say, well, he ruined his suit and his shirt and his undershirt as the bullet went through the guy's heart. We don't look at any of the monetary, the side monetary damages. But over there, in a case where it caused the death, the death of the fetus, there we do view the monetary damages, which would seem to indicate that it's not a capital case. And then, of course, we have the very famous Mishnah, which speaks about a woman who is struggling during her childbirth. And if her life is in danger, then we attribute the status of a rodef. A rodef is a person who is pursuing someone else, trying to kill that person. And we would dismember, if necessary, the embryo in order to get the baby out, and thereby save the life of the mother. The moment the child reaches the avir ha'olam, the air of the world, once a person is born, then we cannot do anything to the embryo in order to, not embryo, to the child at that point, to the baby, in order to save the life of the mother. So these are all these different points that we had gone through. And let us pick up now with those who have the source sheets, number 20. Okay? And the question is, when does abortion become permissible according to Jewish law? And this is one of the reasons why, as we'll see as it unfolds further, why we would prefer the American judicial system to sort of stay out of this. Because once they start to impose restrictions, there very well can and will be situations where halacha will allow for it or will mandate it, and it might not be illegal to do it. Now, I don't think even the most extreme state laws that are being proposed would rule out an abortion when the mother's life is in danger. I don't think that's the case, though I can't say for sure. So that's a case where abortion would be mandated. So I don't know if we're going to have situations where it would be mandated and would not be allowed, but there are certainly many situations, as we'll see, there's a range of halachic approaches. There are certainly many situations where it would be allowed, and according to halacha and according to these different laws that seem to be that are being proposed, it would not be allowed. I'll share with you a story that I shared when I spoke Friday night here in Shul. The person writes, I was born in Tel Adashim. The date was under dispute, but my father and the village determined it was January 11th, 1929. I left my mother's womb to breathe the world's air because my parents were too poor. 4 children came before me, and my father could not provide for them. My parents decided to spare me from such poverty and put an end to my life still in my mother's womb. But we were so poor, my father could not afford the 2 lira necessary to perform the abortion. Be curious to see what, in today's value, what was the value of 2 lira in 1929. Through great effort, my father was able to collect 1 lira and 20 grushim, 1.2 lira. He urged the doctors to do the abortion and promised to pay the balance of 80 grushim at a later date, but the doctors refused, no credit allowed, and a son was born. There were days when my parents would say jokingly, is this kid worth 2 lira? This is based on the testimony of former chief of staff of the IDF, war hero, Major General Rafi Eitan. So that's a bit of a jarring incident where it emphasizes the idea of the potential life. And who knows, but even if a person does not become the chief of staff of the IDF and a war hero, we attribute inestimable value to every human life. If a person is born with severe disabilities, physical, certainly physical, where they can accomplish tremendous things, but even developmental disabilities, and they don't ever develop into something that we would call a regular functioning member of society. But we have such a small glimpse of what a person is truly about. And who knows what sojourn that soul is meant to do and what that soul is accomplishing for itself and for the world at large in going through its life. So we certainly attribute a tremendous amount of value to each and every life and take it very seriously. So yeah, let's begin. There is a halacha that a Kohen, we know, can eat truma. Nowadays, different reasons, Kohanim do not eat truma because unless they have their clear lineage and unless they are in a pure state, and everyone's been to funerals, everyone's been to cemeteries, everyone's been to hospitals, right? But truma goes to a Kohen and to his family and to his sons and to his daughters. A daughter gets married to a non-Kohen, she is not allowed to eat truma. She has a child from that non-Kohen, even if her marriage terminates with the non-Kohen, but she has a child from that Kohen, she too cannot eat truma. Her marriage terminates either through divorce or through a widowhood, and she does not have a living child from the Kohen, then she can go back to the house of her father, so to speak, and eat the truma of her father's house. How does this relate to the topic of abortion? So let us see the Gemara, source 20, the Gemara in Yevamos. Bat Kohen, the daughter of a Kohen, Sheniset li Yisroel, who was married to an Israelite, a non-Kohen. At that point, she can't eat truma. The mate, the husband dies. At that point, she can eat truma, but she might be carrying, we don't know, she might be pregnant. She might be carrying the child of that non-Kohen, which would preclude her from eating truma. The Gemara says, Tovelet v'ochelet b'truma la'erev. That very evening, she can immerse herself in a mikvah because you have to be in a pure state in order to eat truma. And then she could eat truma of her father's house already that evening. But she might be pregnant. Amar Rav Chisda clarifies, Tovelet v'ochelet ad arba'im yom. She can immerse and eat truma for the next 40 days. Why 40 days? De'i lo mi'abra, if she's not pregnant, no problem at all. Lo mi'abra, she's not pregnant, so no problem in her eating the truma. Ve'i mi'abra, even if she is pregnant, ad arba'im maya ba'almahu. Until the 40 days pass, that embryo is considered to be maya, water. So it's not yet considered to be that she is fully pregnant. Interesting. So based on this, we see that we would, or we could, draw a line. We'll soon see what line might be drawn, but a place to draw a line would be 40 days. Because from a Torah point of view, until 40 days, mayim, water, after 40 days, child. So if we're saying, as we'll soon see, there are those poskim who, if we're viewing it as murder, the source being lo tirtzach, thou shalt not murder, so then I can't murder water. This 40 days will be very significant. If the issue is not murder, but the issue is potential life, so then whether we're before 40 days or after 40 days, then it would probably not be as significant. Either way, it's considered to be potential life, right? And we would violate Shabbos to save that potential life. Yes, Gabriella.
Oh, I was just going to mention that that's enough time for the woman to have at least one cycle of pregnancy that she's missed to know that
Yes and no. That's not really going to be the factor. Gabriella said that the 40 days will ensure that she's missed at least one of her periods, and therefore that would be a clear indication that she's pregnant. Very often a woman, it could happen late, unusually late, and a woman could also miss her period, but not necessarily be pregnant. But I believe modern science says that the gender first, the differentiation, we know the gender is based on the chromosomes, right? And that's already going to be at the point of conception. But I believe, so correct me if I'm wrong, that the differentiation begins after about 6 weeks, which would be 42 days. Yeah. Okay. Rav Moshe Feinstein, source number 21, who is certainly one of the preeminent poskim of our generation. He passed away in the 1990s. He takes a very strict approach. And he writes, and we'll go straight to the English. Since abortion is forbidden as murder, both for Gentiles and Jews, therefore the law is that there is a complete prohibition of murder derived from the verse 10 Commandments, thou shalt not murder. Even regarding a fetus, he says, it would be forbidden to kill it even to save someone's life. The exception would be to save the life of the mother during childbirth, not for any other need of the mother, which would definitely be forbidden. So the exception, forbidden to kill it to save someone's life, right? In other words, that would be, I imagine, to harvest an organ or to get something, right? Some of those stem cells, whatever it might be. Why do we differentiate between doing that to save someone's life and the life of the mother? So that goes back to the concept we mentioned before of a rodave, right? If it is this pregnancy that is killing the mother, then the child is deemed, has the status of a rodave, someone pursuing someone else to kill that person. And the law is anyone and everyone should stop that person from committing this intended murder, even if it means taking the life of that person who is the rodave, who is pursuing. In this case, the child has the status of a rodave, and therefore Rav Moshe only allows it in a situation where there is a clear, direct threat to the mother's life. However, we'll soon see there are others that say that any threat to the mother's life that is not a direct threat, but is endangered by the pregnancy, be it heart, kidney, blood pressure, diabetes, any threat, not a direct threat, but any threat to the mother's life that will be endangered by the pregnancy would be grounds for an abortion. And the authority who is known, a very heavyweight halachic authority, is the Tzitz Eliezer, Rabbi Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg, who lived until 2006. He was a Dayana judge on the supreme, the head rabbinical court in Yerushalayim, and he was the Rav of Shari Tzedek Medical Center. Those who know, Shari Tzedek is an observant, is a religious, so to speak, hospital in Jerusalem, where everything is done according to halacha. Everything in the hospital is done according to halacha over there. So he is known to be lenient in different cases. And he writes, source number 22, if there's a danger of the mother from continuing the pregnancy, one should permit abortion without hesitation. Okay? A danger to the mother, not a direct threat to the mother's life, but a danger to the mother of exacerbating certain medical issues that she has. So it's a danger to the mother. We'll come to that soon. Steve asked about psychological damage. Also, if her health is poor, and to cure her or to relieve her from great pain, it is necessary to abort the fetus. This is not life-threatening. This is health is poor or great pain. In the Hebrew, it's important to see the Hebrew. Avapi she'ein sakana mamashit. Even though there is no mamash, literal, actual danger to her life, right? But l'shem refuata, for the sake of her healing, o hashkatat machuvel gedolim, or in order to quell the serious pain that she's in, that would require there to be an abortion. Gam ken yesh makom lahatir la'asot zot. There is room to allow this, and very important. Ukafi ra'ot einei hamora hamatzav shelefanav. Right? This is not boiler template psak halacha. This is not, oh, that's okay, right? It's each individual case being assessed by a competent halachic authority. Okay, Steve mentioned, how about emotional, psychological harm? Okay, and that is, right, pushing the boundaries out a little bit further. But I would say that I believe in the world today, we have a better understanding of the psychological and emotional damage that can be done and is often done to a person, that a person endures. We're a lot more attuned to that. Perhaps we're also a lot more fragile emotionally. I'm not sure, what came first in this case, but I think both are true. I think we're a lot more fragile, and we're also a lot more attuned. PTSD, I'm sure there always was PTSD, but, well, get through it, right? Get over it, right? As opposed to truly addressing, just how debilitating and damaging and damaged a person might be. Yes, Dov. I'm sure they don't want that to have that done to them. Okay, so Dov is bringing up, right, an issue that we have, right? There are situations where of rape, chas v'shalom, of incest, chas v'shalom, where the thought of carrying that child is just so damaging. So let's take a look at 23. Judaism recognizes psychiatric as well as physical factors in evaluating the potential threat that the fetus poses to the mother. However, the danger posed by the fetus, whether physical or emotional, must be both probable and substantial to justify abortion. The degree of mental illness that must be present to justify termination of a pregnancy has been widely debated by rabbinic scholars, without a clear consensus of opinion regarding the exact criteria for permitting abortion in such instances. Nevertheless, all agree that were a pregnancy to cause a woman to become truly suicidal, right, going all the way out to that extreme, to that extent, there would be grounds for abortion. However, several modern rabbinical experts ruled that since pregnancy-induced and postpartum depressions are treatable, abortion is not warranted. So again, we've got a broad range of opinions when we start to go out, further and further out from the center point. The center point of the circle, we'd say, is a direct danger to the mother's life. Absolutely. A not direct danger to the mother's physical life, but will harm her. We're getting further out from the center. There are those that say yes, those that say no. We go to emotional, psychological. We're moving further and further out from that center point. And again, there will be different opinions on that.
So you have to know which rabbi to consult with.
Okay, so Leonard said, so you have to know which rabbi to consult with. And
I didn't mean that sarcastically.
I know, or I know you didn't, and that's why I'm measuring my words carefully. Very often, such a statement could be said in a somewhat sarcastic manner, but I don't think it is a sarcastic manner. I didn't take it as such, and I don't view it as such. Meaning, if someone would come to me with their question, I am not a posek to issue a ruling, but I would have a very extensive conversation with the couple or the mother, depending on what the situation is. And based on my sense of that, then I would direct them accordingly to a truly heavyweight posek for guidance. So yes, I think it does depend who one asks, and not to be flippant about it, but once I would have the best understanding that I feel I can get of the situation, I would use that to determine who I would say they should reach out to. Yeah, because there is a lot of gray area over here. There is a completely other section, category, and that would be genetic disorders, right? Birth defects. Okay. I know very well of a situation where a couple were pregnant, want to have children, but on the ultrasounds, it became apparent very early that there was something seriously wrong with this baby, and it would not develop normally, and it was halachically considered to be incompatible with life, which means that the mother could have carried the baby full term, and the baby could have been born and might have lived for a few minutes, a few hours, or even a few days, but the physiological, biological composition made them incompatible with life. And in this situation, the couple was told that there is no reason for the mother to go through the trauma of carrying full term and then delivering a baby that's going to die. And abortion was halachically mandated. I know of such a case. I know directly of such a case. Genetic disorders, right? Nowadays, we could find out Down syndrome, all these different, now Down syndrome people live a life, very often a very, very wholesome life. And even if, I think it's very important to realize, even if from our point of view, we're viewing it as somewhat limited, but from their point of view, I don't know if they view it as being limited at all. So how do we approach that? So once again, right, Rav Moshe Zatzal takes a pretty clearly defined, somewhat hard line approach, right? And, right, if there's no threat to the mother's life, there is no leniency according to Rav Moshe. Either the baby has little chance of survival, and in the case of Tay Sachs, right? Tay Sachs is a genetic disorder that was prevalent, not prevalent, but would certainly more prevalent than the general population amongst Eastern European Jewish population. And because of that, there is an organization called Dor Mesharim, which means straight generations, that young men and women will go and have themselves tested. They will not be told if you are a carrier or you're not a carrier, but their information will be coded and stored. Their number will be stored, and when that young lady or young man meets a young counterpart that they want to get married, they both will have already done their Dor Mesharim testing. They will send in their names, right, and they'll get an answer from Dor Mesharim, either a good match or a not good match. Right? If it's a good match, neither of them knows if either of one of them was a carrier. It's not relevant because it's only a problem if both are carriers, right? And right, they go ahead and they get married and have their children. Don't have to worry, right? Only if it's told no match, then they realize that they both are carriers. But before this Dor Mesharim, it was a lot more prevalent. Yeah, so let's see that from Rav Moshe. Even for children from whom, I'm going straight to the English, for whom the doctors predict a very short lifespan, such as those children who were born with a disease called Tay Sachs. The case that I know of was beyond Tay Sachs. This was a matter of if the child would survive, the fetus would survive, it was a matter of hours or days, which through newly developed tests can be diagnosed prenatally. It will be forbidden since there is no danger to the mother, and therefore the infant is not a rodef, right? That is Rav Moshe's approach. Rodef or not rodef. This is murder. Murder. If there's a rodef, we take out that person's life who is chasing. Otherwise, we do not. One cannot permit an abortion even though there is a very great degree of suffering involved. It is incontrovertible and clear, as I've written, a straightforward halacha according to the words of our masters, the traditional commentaries and halachic authorities, that abortion will be forbidden as bona fide murder. Right? Rav Moshe is saying this is clear as day. For any fetus, legitimate, or a mamzer, let's say a mamzer is an illegitimate child, does not make a difference. Genetically normal or afflicted with Tay Sachs, all are included in the prohibition according to Jewish law. Okay? And once again, the lenient opinion is the Tzitz Eliezer, Rav Eliezer Yehuda Waldenberg. And he writes, and we saw this, the Gemara that we began with today, about the widowed wife of a daughter of a Kohen, widowed from her non-Kohen husband. We saw the idea of the 40 days, abortion within the first 40 days of the pregnancy, and also before the fetus has completed 3 months of the pregnancy, is a much less severe issue than later in the pregnancy. Therefore, it is possible to permit, again, it's not boilerplate, it is possible to permit an abortion within this time period as long as there are, as of yet, no fetal movements. Right? That's the idea of the 3 months of the fetal movements. If there is an established risk that the child will be deformed and suffer great pain. Bal Yisurim. Regarding Tay Sachs, after seriously examining all the facts concerning this serious question, in my humble opinion, based on what I've already clarified concerning termination of pregnancy in Tzitz Eliezer earlier, it would be possible to permit performing an abortion up until the 7th month. In this unique circumstance where the consequences of continuing the pregnancy are so severe, the abortion must be performed in a manner that there be no danger involved to the mother, right? Obviously, if it's going to be causing a danger to the mother, then we've just turned this whole thing upside down and inside out. That is opposed to an abortion being done to protect the health of the mother or the life of the mother. An abortion now might be the opposite. So as long as that's not the case, from 7 months and on, the matter is much more severe. Interesting. He doesn't say it's absolutely prohibited. It is much more severe. Hadavar kvar yoter chamor. Right? It is much more strict and serious. So the Tzitz Eliezer is, again, a very heavyweight posek, and he expands the boundaries of what can be allowed in particular instances. Okay, as I mentioned before, Jewish law is not so much based on who makes the rights of the individual, right? And the right of autonomy and making their decisions, right? But rather, it's a question of what is the correct course of action. Meaning, we look at the Torah as the medium through which God shared his will with us. And therefore, when we look at the Torah shebichtav, the written Torah, the Torah shebal peh, so that is our way of determining what is the correct thing to do. What is it that God wants me to do in this situation? Halacha comes from the term lalechet, halach, right? What is to go? What is the path that a person is meant to go on? Okay. Now, even the tzitz, so number 26. This is Rabbi Yitzchak Breitowitz, how a rabbi decides a medical halachic issue. Right? This is from J Law. Secular law is primarily concerned with who gets to make a decision. Courts, legislators are thus preoccupied with advanced directives, surrogate decision-making, ethics committees, institutional review boards. This is so because the primary value the law seeks to enshrine is the autonomy of the individual. Thus, once we identify the who, we essentially have no interest in the what. Once we've identified who makes the decision, then it's their decision, right? Short of physician-assisted suicide, which in some places, even that is allowed. But short of that, basically, it's whatever that person decides they can do. By contrast, Jewish law is far more interested in the substance of what the decision should be. And in theory, the resolution should not depend on the identity, personal predilections of the decider. Secular law asks who decides. Jewish law asks what is to be decided. Okay. So clearly, right, is Judaism pro-choice? Yes. Is Judaism pro-life? Yes. Right? But it's not a black or white situation. We are certainly pro-life, but certain situations will override that pro-life and the value of this potential human being. Pro-choice, yes, we're certainly pro-choice, but we also feel the choice needs to be made in a responsible manner. And it would be somewhat immoral if the choice is being made in a non-reasoned, responsible manner. But we prefer, we'll soon see a very interesting piece in number 27, how Rav Moshe, how he viewed the question of government mandated end of life. Right? That's another big topic. Right? When is a person considered to be halachically dead? There are certain organs that can only be harvested at this point, successfully harvested and transplanted while the heart is still beating. One of those happens to be a heart. Once the heart stops, so transporting it, implanting is not going to be effective. I think we're starting to push the frontiers of that somewhat now. I believe lung also, it needs to be while the heart is still beating. But if the heart's beating, the person's alive. You can't kill this person to save another person. So from there, we have the idea of brain death. That if there is no brain activity, then there are those who halachically view the person as being physiologically decapitated, meaning if we were to theorize, right, that there was a terrible accident and a person was, heaven forbid, decapitated. So for a few moments, the heart's going to, right, the head comes off, the heart's not going to stop immediately. The heart's going to continue beating. So in that case, everyone would agree that even though the heart is beating, this person is dead. So there are those that view brain death as physiological decapitation. It might still be attached to the body, but if it's not interacting, then the person is dead. In which case, even though the heart is beating, these organs can be harvested. If that's the case, one can do that. If that's not the case, then it's murder. It's suicide to give directions for that. It's murder for the person who actually goes ahead and does that. So the legislative decision of time of death as it relates to halacha is very, very profound. The decision, number 27, this is Michael Broider. The decision by Jewish organizations to support, oppose, or remain neutral in dispute where certain people desire to expand their civil rights is not determined solely by whether the group under discussion is one generally in compliance with Jewish law or morality. It is in the best, so even if it's a group that normally is aligned with Jewish morality, we are still very, very cautious. It is in the best interest of Judaism to support the continuing granting of basic civil rights to all, while making clear our moral opposition to the underlying conduct of those who exercise their freedom in violation of basic ethical norms of Judaism. We rather it not be legislated, even though those rights might allow people to act in a way that goes against the moral fiber of Judaism, but we do not need to be the moral custodians of a society. Yes, Esther. Number 27, the first paragraph. I'm sorry?
I think I'm reading 26.
I read 26. Let me make sure.
Yeah, I think so.
I read 26.
You've just been reading 27.
No, I'm reading 27 now.
Then it starts with-
Oh. Okay, yes, okay. I didn't, yes. We'll pick up now in number 27. There's still 26. That's actually, it's 27, but I didn't copy all that for you. I keep some special stuff for me, so I have to make myself worthwhile of you. I have to keep my job. Okay, so let's see now. Legislative goals, 27, which do not necessarily seek to enforce Jewish law. Okay, we're not seeking that the government should be enforcing Jewish law, can be well supported from a pure Jewish law perspective. For example, 1977, Rav Moshe was asked what statutory changes Orthodox Judaism should seek from the New York State government on the issue of time of death. And the issue then again is brain death. He replied that Orthodox Judaism should seek a legislative mandate that allows each person or family to determine the time of death in accordance with their own religious or personal beliefs. That's what the law should allow, that everyone can do it according to their conscience, according to their religious belief. Everyone should be able to make that decision. It should not, no one state should be imposed on everyone. He did not suggest that the proper governmental policy to seek is that New York State should be urged to adopt Jewish law in this area. The public policy advocated by Rav Feinstein in the context of time of death, one of Orthodox Judaism seeking to allow Jews to follow Jewish tradition without forcing our standards on non-believers, non-members, or Jews who are non-believers, was the preferred one. This was so, notwithstanding the certainty that some people, given this new freedom, will adopt a standard for time of death which violates Jewish law by withdrawing care before a time permitted by Jewish law, thus committing suicide or even murder. This is even by Jews. Even by Jews. But we don't want the government to legislate in a way that those who do want to fulfill the halacha will be in opposition to the legal standards. Rav Feinstein did not feel compelled to seek the enforcement of Jewish law by the secular state. In number 28, we have the approach, make sure I have everything the same over here. Yes. Yes.
For point 27, it says Rabbi Michael Boyd. So
Mhm.
it should actually be Feinstein, or?
No. Yes, this is,
The whole
yeah.
paragraph.
Yes, he's quoting from the position that Rav Moshe took over there by the time of death in order to create a framework of how we are meant to approach, which is really the approach that is why many the OU, right, was not so happy with the repeal of Roe v. Wade, because now it's going to be left to the states, to individual states, and some individual states might enact legislation that will make it illegal in situations that halacha would allow for, approve of. Right? So we much rather a separation of church and state. That's what we would much prefer when it comes to these areas, giving us the ability to choose according to our conscience, even though other people, when choosing according to their conscience, might be unconscionable according to our value system. But it's not for us to impose our Jewish laws and value system on the society at large. Of course, we'll come to Israel in a moment, and I'll share some views on that also.
Rabbi,
Yes.
that when these laws do start coming about, there'll be a move on behalf of OU to try and include this stuff in legislation.
I hope so. I believe so.
It's never happened before that I know in any kind of legislation. This would be a good opportunity.
Wait, there is a very strong OU advocacy group, right, who get involved, right, in many of these when it comes to tuition, right, when it comes to state funding being able to be used, right. When I was living in Muncie, so the kids were in yeshiva in private school, but the busing was provided by Ramapo County, right? We had free busing to get the kids to and from school, right? So a lot of that comes about and came about through the advocacy. There is a lot of legal advocacy, and I'm sure if states with probably with sizable Jewish communities, probably if states are going to enact, they will look to have some sort of a provision put in for religious.
I think there's even a lawsuit right now in the state of Florida brought by either a Jewish synagogue,
Yeah.
community group.
Yeah.
On that very point.
Yeah. Actually, last week I started with that article. I started with that article last week, right? Yeah, that Florida, the concern being that Florida state of Florida is going to restrict it beyond that which would, in situations where halacha would allow for it. Yeah. So there's certainly, and that was being brought by a non-Orthodox synagogue, temple, whatever you want to call it, but their views, I would align with their views that this should not be limited by the secular government when it comes to areas where religion plays a role. The Agudat Israel, see number 28, right? I think, well, let's hear. Agudat Israel has taken positions on a host of legislative and public policy issues that touch upon fundamental moral concerns and impact upon the family unit. One illustration of this approach is in the context of abortion. Jewish tradition teaches that a human fetus has status and dignity, and termination of pregnancy raises profound moral concerns. Agudat Israel has urged the Supreme Court to reconsider its holding in Roe v. Wade and supports legislation that restricts abortion on demand. Okay, now that's interesting. That's going, I think, beyond the approach that Rav Moshe had taken, right? And that's almost saying, well, restrict it, but don't interfere with us. Restrict it for that which we think shouldn't be done. And again, I think this is a slightly different approach. At the same time, in line with the support for religious freedom, Agudat Israel opposes initiatives that would make abortion unlawful, even when termination is mandated by religious law, as it is, for example, under Sinaitic Jewish law, when the pregnancy endangers the life of the mother. Now that becomes somewhat difficult because, right, well, who's to say your religion is better than my religion? And I have a religion called Cinerism. And in the religion of Cinerism, right, I can say whatever is within the realm of the laws of Cinerism, as dictated by God to, you guessed it, Ciner, right? And it becomes very, 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 very cloudy, right? I much prefer the approach that Rabbi Michael Brody wrote in the name of Moshe, that we need to stay out of this. And as long as we and others can go according to their conscience, that's what we need to have. Yes, Your Honor.
If the prospective mother and the prospective father consult with two different rabbis together, separately, and get two different opinions, whose opinion, if any, has priority? The mother who will be forced to carry it, or the father?
Interesting question. I don't know if how well the mic picks up. The question was posed if the prospective mother, prospective father, each asked their shaila, each asked their question to two different rabbis, right, and received different answers.
They didn't go together; they went separately.
I understand. Yeah. Well, certainly, I would say the first thing, right, is we want to avoid such a situation, and ideally, such a situation needs to be they need to go together for that. I would imagine, though, in the case that you described, ultimately it's going to be the mother. The mother, she's the one who's either going to go to the hospital or the clinic and have it done, or is not going to go. It's hard to imagine, right, how the husband, right, would be able to force the psak that he got onto the wife when she is in disagreement, either to maintain the pregnancy or to terminate. That's what I would imagine. Number 29, right? The Tzitz Eliezer is the most lenient, as we've been seeing from different quotes from his Psak Halacha. However, right, he himself writes, Chol b'nei Yisroel muzarim ba'azhara chamura. All of Israel is warned with a very, very strict warning. Lo linhog kalut rosh, not to act in a light-headed manner, in a casual manner, b'hafsakata herayon, when it comes to the termination of a pregnancy. V'achrayut gedola mutelet bazeh al hashoel, hein al hashoel, ve'hein al hanishal. And there is a tremendous responsibility that is riding on the shoulders of those who ask and those to whom the questions are being asked to. This is very, very serious, serious things. I think in yours also I included a story about Rav Shlomo Zalman. Yeah, Linda, you mentioned this to me. I had this. Yes. Okay. As we've been saying, as we've been seeing, it's a very, very delicate balance. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal was one of the great halachic poskim of the 20th century, lived in Jerusalem, Yerushalayim. I had the privilege of attending his funeral, and there was, I think it was 300, 400,000 people there. And the secular press in Israel was astounded, shocked. Where did this come from? Right? He was not involved in politics. He was the Rosh Yeshiva of a pretty small yeshiva, but not one that was involved in on a national scale. He was an incredibly sweet, gentle, humble man that the yeshiva that I was teaching in Israel, we would bring groups of the boys to meet him, and the way that he would stand up and greet each of the boys, he was incredible. And he was a world-class posek that everyone recognized his erudition, and across all the different, whether one was in the Haredi world in Israel, in the yeshiva world in Israel, in the Mizrahi world, and everyone recognized the greatness of this human being. And I think it's his humanity that really comes through in the following story. A woman interested in Judaism went to study in Jerusalem. She is learning about Torah, mitzvot, making real progress. One day she announced to a teacher she has decided to leave. Why? Because I'm pregnant and I want to terminate my pregnancy. Why do you want to terminate your pregnancy? Because I want to embark on a career. This pregnancy is going to make things just too difficult. What does your husband say? He stands by my decision. The teacher sees that he is out of his depth. Listen, he says, you're going to have an abortion. You should be aware that it is a dangerous procedure. Let me take you to a great rabbi, a holy person. Let's ask him for a blessing to get you through this abortion safely. Okay, we'll come back to this, right? This rabbi had no intent that Shlomo Zalman was going to give her a bracha, right? And I think this is important. It's going to come up in a few moments when we discuss the issue in Israel today. I'll go along to act as your interpreter. The woman agrees. The teacher takes it to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach Zatzal. I would like a blessing, she says to Rav Shlomo Zalman. I'm going to terminate my pregnancy, and I'm asking for a blessing. Why would you want to terminate your pregnancy? He asked. I want to pursue a career, she says. What kind of career do you want to pursue? I want to become a doctor. Why do you want to become a doctor? A doctor saves lives. Rav Shlomo Zalman smiles and asks, really? And what is so important about saving lives? The woman is startled by the question. She gives him a strange look, as if she was wondering if he was senile. What's important about saving lives? Saving a life is the most important thing in this world. All of a sudden, the significance of what she has just said hits her. She looks at Rav Shlomo Zalman, points to her abdomen. You don't mean this, do you? It can become a life, a human being. The woman nods in acceptance. Article from June 26th. I know it's outdated. It's 4 days already. I apologize that I'm not as current as I tried to be. Israel eases access to abortion days after U.S. Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade. New rules allow drug-induced early-term abortions at clinics and requirement for in-person approval by intrusive committees. That's sort of the headline. Let's hear. The Knesset Labor, Welfare, and Health Committee on Monday approved new regulations aimed at making it easier for women to get an abortion by removing some of the procedures required, opening up broader and simplified options for those seeking to end a pregnancy. Women will no longer have to physically face a review committee that approves abortion. The request form, in the past faced criticism of being too invasive and humiliating, will also be updated. The form, which dates back to 1977, will no longer include questions that probed whether women and their partners used contraceptives. We are in a different place, and today we're taking big steps in the right directions, this minister said. There will also be no requirement to meet with a social worker as part of the process to apply for an abortion, as is currently the case. Rather, such meetings will be available to those who want them for support. By Israeli law, women do not have an automatic right to an abortion, rather must request permission from a legally mandated end pregnancy committee made up of 3 representatives of the hospital or clinic that will perform the procedure. Married women aged 18 to 40 often have to lie in order to meet one of the criteria required for approval, the head of one committee told Army Radio early this week. Women have complained for years that the panels are needlessly invasive and humiliating, and some feel they have no choice but to lie to the committee in order to be granted permission. So that's interesting. And I'm sure there'll be different views amongst us when it comes to this. Rav Moshe spoke about, and Rav Brody spoke, Rav Moshe, that we don't want to impose Jewish law on a society. And in America, that's obvious, right? Thank you, Dov. That's why I bring Dov here. What about Israel, right? Do we want to impose Jewish law on the society at large? And you might think that me as the rabbi would say, yes, we do, and we should mandate that they go before a committee to make sure that it is appropriate, or at least mandate they go for a committee that, like in the case of Shlomo Zalman, that perhaps they'll be able to hear another view and have a better understanding and change their mind. Personally, I don't agree with that supposed rabbinic position. And there is a lot of halachic imposition that's done in Israel called kfiyat hadat, forcing religion. And I don't think it has worked well for general Israeli society. I don't think it has worked well for the non-religious. And, you know, I've experienced, I think there are many Israelis who come to the States, and only here can they start to really connect to religious observance of their Judaism, because it's not being shoved down their throat. And in Israel, only the Rabbanut can perform marriages and divorces. And there's a wonderful organization we had him speak over Zoom to us from Sohar, right, which seeks to soften the interactions that the secular are forced to have with the rabbinate when it comes to certain areas, be it marriage and divorce, and that it should be a positive, uplifting interaction. as opposed to one that they find callous and sometimes degrading. And I think forcing people as much as I would hope everybody would follow the and I would hope everybody would make decisions that I view as being moral, but forcing people to go, and that's what I was even uncomfortable with telling this woman, let's go get a document. As opposed to saying, let's go discuss the and that's the arsenal. But I with a person was not doing anything. He wanted to change. Maybe there were who changed their mind as a result. I to ears, open heart, open mind, to hear a different approach. I, you go for you.